My name is Todd Bitter. I'm with JKS Mortgage here in Scottsdale, Arizona. I got into business in the mid 90s, so I'm kind of like a really old timer. um, it doesn't seem that long ago, but when I look at the number of years, it's been a long time. So, if you've seen me speak, you'll hear me talk about how I've had two careers in the mortgage industry. I had kind of like the Bible is BC and AD. My career is like before 2008, after 2008. So, and really after 2008 is when my career really took off because I started doing the right things, not just focusing on subprime. But I do a lot. I do mostly conventional business. I know it all, but I shouldn't say I know it all. I know all the different channels of products, because I've done them all over the years, but I focus mainly on the cleaner conventional stuff because I'm very real estate driven. I don't do any real consumer direct at all. The only thing that's not closed via a realtor referral is if another loan officer in our state gives me a referral, or if it's a previous client of mine giving a referral. But I literally do not do any Facebook ads, any Zoom, or not Zoom, Zillow, or any of that stuff. So it's all real estate built and driven. And that's kind of what we're going to talk about today as far as like 2-1 buy down, where the 2-1 buy down starts. So that's a little bit of my introduction. I'm sure Anthony probably wants me to put in there too that, over the last number of years, I've averaged about $100 million a year in production, all off of realtors, basically. Very little refi business. I hired a guy in 2020 to basically just take my refi. So last year, I think I closed like maybe 13 or 14% of my business was refi. And that was only because those are customers that would have been offended if I would have passed them off to Adam. So I really do focus on realtors only. And just I process my own deals. I don't have an assistant. I don't have a processor. All that volume I've done over the years has been me alone in my house. You're seeing this is my home office. This is where I work out of. It's a little bit nicer than the one I was working out of last year because I bought a new house. But other than that, it's just the same structure I've always had. I do my own processing, do everything myself.
So Todd, here's one thing I'd like to ask you one question specifically on how this got started, but like the story you told me about kind of regulating the lender, the in-house lender for one of your big realtors. But the first thing is like, we can assume everybody knows what the 2-1 buy down is, but if you had to explain it to a real estate agent who had no idea what it is, how would you explain what is a 2-1 buy down to them?
Sure. So let me start with how it got started. And I will tell you what. Let me start with 2-1. The 2-1 buy down is simply, it's the regular 30-year fixed rate. So if you look at your rate sheet and price out 30-year fixed rate, if it's 7% today, then the years 3 through 30 is that same 7%. Like a 2-1 buy down does not change anything about that fixed rate pricing. You're basically pricing it as a 30-year fix. But then you click, like with UWM, you click the box in the pricing module that says 2-1 buy down, and that just adds the two other rates. So if your fixed rate is 7%, if you do it as a 2-1 buy down, the first year is 5%, the second year is 6%, and then years 3 through 30 is the 7%. So it's not a different product where, to get the 2-1 buy down, the pricing's a little different or the rate is a little higher to start. It's truly the exact same rate, price, everything as a 30-year fix. It just uses seller concessions to take that rate down 2 points for the first year, 1 point for the second year, and then years 3 through 30 is just a 30-year fixed rate. The way it got started, I'll back up before that. So when UWM rolled it out and I saw it, I thought, okay, great, here we go. Here's those same gimmick products that were given to us back in the 90s and early 2000s, because the 2-1 buy down's been around for as long as I've been in the business. A big builder thing. But a lot of the rates, a lot of the mortgage companies or lenders that we sold loans to, they offered it for years. It kind of went away after 2008. I'm sure it was still lingering out there somewhere, but it really did kind of go away and just became popular recently when these rates shot up so high. And you had buyers that literally were like, oh my God, I'm not paying $4,000 a month for a house payment, so I'm going to not buy a house this year. And it, gave the lenders like UWM, a few others, the opportunity to say, maybe we need to bring this product back to really help the realtors and the buyers and the loan officers offer something that will entice buyers off the fence post right now. Because I don't know about where you guys are at. Arizona right now, there's a ton of people sitting on the fence post right now, just waiting to buy, but they're sticker shock by rates. A few of them are also hearing all the chatter about home prices falling. So I do have some buyers who are like, hey, I'm going to wait and see what home prices do over the next 4 months. But mostly it's rates versus payments that's killing a lot of these potential home buyers. So when UWM rolled it out, like everything else, I'm a skeptical guy. I was like, I didn't really look into it very deeply. Years and years ago, the 2-1 buy downs, you lost any money that was used to offset the 2-1 buy down. You lost when you refinanced or purchased or sold the home if you did it early into the process. So I assume that's how it worked. A month or so or whatever it went by, and my AE at UWM, who I have a great relationship, Andrew, he called me, says, I would think this 2-1 buy down's right up your alley. And I'm like, whatever. I kind of blew him off a little bit and said, but everybody's going to refinance in the next 6 months to 16 months, and they're going to waste all that money. And Andrew's like, obviously you haven't read my emails. You don't lose that money. And he started walking me through it, and I was like, oh, okay. So if the seller puts up $12,000, meaning that's 12,000 that could have been discounted off the home, but they put up $12,000 for a 2-1 buy down, and 6 months in, rates fall and the customer refinances. So that money's not lost. He's like, no, it comes back as a principal reduction credit off their home. So basically, in essence, it's a payoff discount off the payoff. So they get that money. It's not a check in their pocket, but it might as well be, because it comes off what they owe in the house. I'm like, wow, okay, so there's no lose here. So that's what really got me interested in the 2-1 buy down. So then he did what his job was as an AE and got me to look at it a little closer. I did my job and researched and like, okay, this truly is a good product. It works here in Arizona. It works for my market. And I started reading through it, figure out how to do it, ran a bunch of scenarios to get an idea of how it works. And then I started trying to sell it. I started telling customers about it. I would call some of my old customers back that were fence sitters that, I had pre-qualified months ago, but they were just sitting on the sidelines. Started talking to them about it. It went well, but then the realtor, that buyer would call the realtor, and then the realtor would be lost. So I realized that starting with the buyer is the biggest mistake you can make. Unless, of course, they're coming to you without a realtor, which, let's face it, that's not often. If they're coming to you without a realtor, obviously you want to plant the seeds, but you want to tell them, hey, we need to find you a realtor, and then you need to talk to the realtor. So again, it starts with the realtor. You have got to start this with the realtor. If you're really into doing a lot of business with builders, I know I saw one of my buddies log in here that is a big builder guy. Then you have to start with the builder, but it all starts with the agent or the builder, and you have to educate them on it. Excuse me. So what I did at the same time as I was really starting to get into this 2-1 buy down, one of my biggest accounts is a company called Redfin. I do a lot of business with Redfin. Redfin bought Bay Equity, which was a struggling mortgage company back in, well, they made the deal at the end of last year, but they didn't finalize and close it until April of this year. Not for the first couple of months after they closed the deal, they were pushing it pretty hard, but they weren't requiring their agents to only send business to Redfin. Over the summer, they cracked down on their agents because nobody in the agencies wanted to work with Redfin, so they were still sending me all their, or just work with Bay Equities, they were sending me all their business. Redfin then, as a corporation, decided to say, you can only send customers to Bay Equity, and then if they are falling out, you can then refer them to somebody else. So it really cut into my business a little bit. And we did some things to counteract that, which worked. But then in early September, right after the Fed hike, and the rates didn't drop after that Fed hike, the Bay Equity guys sent a company-wide memo out across the whole country to all the Redfin agents saying, you can't sell, there's no such thing as a par rate. Every single rate has points because they're below at retail. And then they were telling their agents, you have to build in at least 2.5 to 3% on all your contracts. Just start them all with 3% seller concessions, because we're going to need that to cover the points just to get a basic rate. I started getting phone calls from agents saying, is this right? They're telling us this is nationwide. There's no mortgage company out there that can do a par rate right now. I'm like, okay, well, they're full of it. Maybe retail, but we've never not sold a par rate. So that started an email that I started putting together one Sunday night, and just saying, hey, I want to disperse these myths about rates. And then I thought, you know what, I'm going to add the 2-1 buy down here. So it started off with, and I can share this email with everybody. It's a little dated now because it's from September, but it was just dispelling the rumors. Hey, I've heard these rumors. I didn't say Redfin in it. If you see the email, you'll say I had a Keller Williams agent, because I don't have any Keller Williams agents I work with on a regular basis. So I blasted this email out to every single agent I work with, Redfin and traditional agents. It went out to a ton of agents. Even the ones I've done maybe one loan with in the last 6 years. If I did a loan with you and you're an agent, I would send it to you. It was just basically saying, hey, here's the rumors about rates. It's BS that you can't sell rates without points. We do it all the time. I kind of explained the difference between wholesale and retail. I was very careful, and when you see the email, I'm not bashing retail lenders. The last thing you want to do is bash a retail guy that maybe your agent has a relationship with. Every agent I work with has at least 1 or 2 other loan officers that they like and work with. I'm just usually their top guy, but sometimes I'm their number 2 or 3 guy. So for me to put something in there bashing these other retail lenders is going to look bad on me. But I did it in a fun way and just said, hey, this is what we can do. Here's the difference between what we are in wholesale, or retail and wholesale is. And I said, don't blame your loan officer on the retail side for telling you this. It's just what he's been taught by his management. It's not the loan officer's fault. It's the manager's fault or the CEO's fault at those retail lenders. I said, by the way, if you see your retail LO today, you might want to give them a hug after you read this email or something, just to lighten it up, so I don't feel like I'm being nasty towards the retail guy. And then I went into it, and I said at the end of the, after that, I went into it and said, okay, here's the good stuff. And I highlighted that and underlined it. And then I go into the 2-1 buy down. And I just gave them examples. I said, this is an exciting product. You guys, most of the agents in my market, probably nationwide, log in and listen to the Cromford Report. I don't know if any of you guys have ever heard of the Cromford Report. It's it's almost like a Barry Habib for the real estate industry. Like, they tell about new products, they tell about all the different, like what the market's doing and all that good stuff. It's very similar to like an MBS highway for realtors, but it's not rates, it's just products. They started pushing these 2-1 buy downs again on the Cromford Report back in the summer months when rates really had spiked up. And we started hearing about it, but none of the agents really understood it. And a lot of the agents kind of blew it off. I had a few agents ask me about it back in the summer. Yeah, I don't, it's good luck getting a seller to give concessions to do it, because honestly, in the Arizona market, we went from July, where you would be laughed off out of the open house or wherever if you suggested a seller give concessions, to August, where every single seller is giving concessions now. I mean, the market snapped that fast for us. So I sent this email out. I talked about the 2-1 buy down, gave some ideas about it, gave some examples. And that was at like 1 a.m. on a Sunday night. I'm a night owl. I'm up really late at night. You guys might get emails from me at like 2, 3 in the morning. I woke up at 7:30 the next morning, Monday mornings, checking my email. And literally I had like 6 or 7 realtors that were early birds that had already read my email and reached out to me. One of them was a manager at Redfin that had been forcing his employees to only refer Bay Equity. And he said, I got to ask you about this, because if this is true, it's a game changer for us. And we're going to have to let our agents start using you and not pushing Bay so hard. Went through it with the manager at Redfin. He was like, okay, this is great. Bay's not offering it. That day, he told his agents, look, you can refer both Todd and Bay Equity. And that's been a game changer ever since at Redfin for me. But my traditional agents reach out as well, and I'm doing them with traditional agents as well. So so that's kind of what started it. Sorry, that was a long example of what started it, but I want to give you the whole context of how it all started.
You know, that's good. I personally would say like the context is critical, because the approach to how you're going about this, like the email at the end of this message, I'll share the email that Todd sent that really kicked everything off. And it's really well laid out to get the realtor on the hook, just like it was like how the UWMAE got Todd on the hook. It was like, you know, you see it, you hear about it, but like, how do you actually sell it? So Todd, let's get into like, when it comes to, you know, you got an agent, how are you presenting this?
Yeah, so excuse me, I'm losing my voice. The first thing I do, you know, so now I've talked to many agents afterwards, right? After that email, like I said, 7 of them reached out right away. More reached out as the day or two went on, and I started calling behind them to the main agents I knew really well. And I just told them, I said, look, I said, I think this product is going to be the thing that's going to get these fence sitters moving again. And I went through it with them. I showed them the difference in the payments. You know, I used some different examples. I think the email that Anthony's going to share with you is like 500,000 sale price or something. It's not at the height of the market, because we do a lot of 715, you know, or max conventionals here in Arizona. But I use like a middle of the road email or middle of the road loan amount sale price, and just showed them. I said, look, you know, you're saving these people $600 a month the first year, you know, $300 a month the second year. And I showed them basically we were really busy the first 6 months of this year. And then when rates really spiked up in early summer, I think it was early June, that's when a lot of the buyers start sitting on the fence, and my agents start really whining and crying about how slow it was. And, you know, I've got all these pre-approved buyers, but none of them want to buy right now because they can't afford the payments. You know, now let me back up about affordability. On the 2-1 buy down, they still qualify DTI as the full rate. But that's not for my buyers. That was never the problem. I had only a few buyers that no longer qualified due to the DTI issues. I just had buyers that were like, hey, you know, I'm not paying $600 more than what my rent is right now. I'll wait and see if rates come down. You know, so we had a lot of that. So that's where I started. I started with the agents and just saying, hey, this is going to be the product that's going to get these guys off the fence post and back to looking at homes again. And we went through the scenarios. We went through how much it saved them the first year, how much it saved them the second year. We went through, you know, this is how you construct it. You have to work with your loan officer, even if it's not me. You have to work with the loan officer, because every single deal is a little different. And that's something that's really important that you have to know. A 5% down, loan will need about 2.25% from the seller. Now that can vary depending upon credit score and everything else, but about 2.25% from the seller is what it takes on a 5% down loan. A 20% down loan is actually a little bit under 2%. I think it works out to like 1.8 or something like that. Again, on average. And then like I did one the other day that had 30% down, and it was about 1.5%. So the more money down, the less seller concessions they need. But you have to know, and the first thing I tell every realtor that gets excited about this, and I've got quite a few realtors that are excited about this, you know, you gotta call me and we have to run the numbers before you make the offer. Because if you offer 2.25% seller concessions and it gets accepted, and then when I crunch the numbers, it takes 2.6, which might only be a few $100s more. The way the program works right now, and I've heard this may be changing, but for now, every penny has to come from the seller. The realtor can't contribute any of their commission to it. We can't use lender credits for it by selling a higher rate. This buyer can't contribute to it either. So again, I've heard from UWM that they're working on possibly fixing that to where it doesn't have to 100% come from the seller. But just for now, you got to expect that it is, because they haven't changed it. So it's really important that you and the realtor crunch the numbers before the offer's made. If we crunch the numbers and it takes $12,000 for the 2-1 buy down, I tell the realtor ask for 12,250 or 12,3. Pad it. because in the time the offer's made, the contract's accepted, and you go to put that in your system and lock the rate. Well, you guys have seen the rate roller coaster we've been on. Things can change dramatically in 24 hours. And you never want to work that buy down to the penny, because you could end up being short $100 or $5. If it's short $1, you're out of the buy down. Then you got to go back to the seller and look crazy. So always pad it by at least $200. I've started finding that what my agents are doing in Arizona is they're just asking for 3% right out of the gate, and then what we do, if we need 2.25 for the buy down, the other 75 basis points of seller concessions are paying other closing costs, and the buyer's even happier. But if they're not just doing a straight 3%, then you're going to have to do the calculation for them. And not every market right now is getting 3%. I mean, Arizona turned really quickly. I'm hearing more and more out west here that's the case. I got a good friend in Mississippi, Michelle Dugan. She said they're still in that purchase market where the sellers are laughing at people asking for concessions. Maybe 1,000 or something, but she said, Todd, I can't sell it. I'm trying, but my realtors just aren't at that. The sellers aren't at that point yet. And then she made a joke about how Mississippi is always behind the curve of the West Coast, and she's probably right. So they'll get there. The markets change rapidly in the real estate market, and the sellers are starting to give up concessions. So it's a conversation you're going to have with your realtors in your market, because my market's different than your guys' markets. If the sellers are giving up concessions and it's not something that's going to cause a problem, then yes, this is where you need to take your product, and you need to really push this, because it's going to be a tremendous benefit to you. But again, that's how I started the conversation with the realtors is, and they started running through their databases. And immediately I had, I don't know, like that first week I had like 4 or 5 that came back to me and said, hey, can you call, Mr. Patel, who hasn't looked at a house, and you pre-called him 6 months ago. He wants a phone call to talk about this. And then the realtors started having me call back customers that they reached back out to. The realtors are calling the customer saying, hey, I know you've been waiting, but we have this new product that Todd has who pre-qualified you, and what if we get your payment down $500-$600 a month? I just closed one last week that was a $715 loan amount, and it saved $936 the first year on payment. I mean, that's a big lower payment. And that guy had not looked at homes with his agent since May. She called him, we went through it, and he went out looking at houses, and like the second week out, he got under contract, and we just closed them. So the agents in turn are excited because they got something new to help those buyers that are like waiting. It's giving them a whole new thing to call the buyers back instead of just a typical, hey, just checking in with you. Now they're calling them with something exciting. And my agents have eaten it up, and they seem to love it. I actually closed one 3 weeks ago that I never pre-qualified. It was a customer that was sitting on the fence post that had a pre-qual from another lender. And the agent called and said, hey, I don't know if your lender even offers it, but my guy does. The customer called me, and we put it together, and now we have a deal that I would have never had in the first place, because they love their lender to start with, but he didn't offer the 2-1 buy down. So that's kind of where it all became, and that's how we're going with it, and that's how we're selling it. You gotta sell it to the realtor first. There's no doubt about it.
So Todd, when you're presenting it to the real estate agent, I mean, is the context essentially like, this is, year 1 they're saving 2%, year 2 they're saving 1%, and then year 3 they're refinancing? Is that the general context?
Yeah, well, yeah, I mean, not even year 3. I mean, I just go through, I listen to Barry Habib, I listen to all these guys, I use all the tools at my disposal. And if you listen to the guys like Barry that are the experts on mortgage rates and mortgage-backed securities, they'll tell you, hey, we see potential to refi. All the 2022 customers will probably be refied by the end of 2023. I just saw Barry less than 2 weeks ago, last Friday. He was at an event that I was speaking at, and I listened to Barry, and he had changed up his speech I'd heard so many times before. And he basically, he's 100% adamant that we're going to see rates fall into the mid to low fives during the end by the end of January, and during the first quarter next year, he's saying we're going to be in the high fours. I am. God bless him if he's right, but even if he's wrong, it takes 6 months longer. Okay, you're still more than likely going to have an opportunity to refinance these customers during the first year. You know, but let's say it takes.
And if that happens, the customer gets, so if that hypothetically that happens, you refi them, rates drop to 5%. Let's say there's 2.25% in the account, and at that point you've gone through a year of the money, so there's 1% left. They get the money back. So no matter what, it's like when you're positioning it to the client, it's like, hey, this money's going into this account. If rates do drop and we can refinance you to a 30-year fixed at 5%, you're getting this money back anyway.
Yeah. So if you haven't done one yet, when you structure it up and I'm using UW as an example because they're the ones that seem to have a great product. But when you go in and set up your disclosures, it automatically calculates for you. And there's a calculator in UWM system if you don't want to do it by hand. But it's a section H fee. It's not up in the section A where it's a permanent buy down. It's a section H fee. In essence, it's an escrow account that the seller funds. And then what they do is every month. So let's use an example of somebody that's saving $600 a month the first year and $900 a month the second year. Okay. That is a total of $10,800 that the seller has to fund. Okay. That goes into a section H on your loan estimate. That $10,800 is held by the lender in escrow. When the first mortgage payment is due, the customer is going to get a statement that shows their mortgage payment is $3,000. There's a $600 offset for that first year of monthly payment. So amount due $2,400. So the mortgage statement will come out and show the full payment. It'll show the offsets, or I haven't seen the statement because I haven't had a payment come out with that customer share with me. I'm gonna get one. But it was explained to me that the payment will show that the credit's already given for that month's payment, and then here's the amount due. So if you do if we use the example of $600 a month for the first year, $300 a month for the second year, that's $10,800 that the seller has to provide at closing. Let's say that they refinance after they've made 5 payments. And we don't want to hear that because of the EPOs, but it just makes the math easier. $600 a month times $600 a month savings times 5 months of payments is $3,000, correct? So that $3,000 has been used out of that $10,800. So at closing, they now have a $7,800 credit off to their principal reduction off their payoff. So that money was unused. They get it back in a form of a principal reduction from their payoff. So that $7,800 did not go to waste. If it was a permanent buy down, let's say you took a customer and you bought the rate down 0.75% permanently, and that cost that same $10,800, and it saved them. First of all, the savings is not going to be anywhere near as much for the first year or permanently. It might save them $200 a month, or let's just say $300. Let's go with $300. Let's say it saves them $300 a month, and they refinance after 10 months, and the same $3,000 was used, but just took longer to get the $3,000. They don't get the $7,800 back. Boom, it's gone. They never get it back. So permanent buy downs in this market right now, I mean, if you have some money left over because you have seller concessions, but they would never give enough for a 2-1 buy down. After all the closing costs are paid, you got $900 in seller concessions. Great, use it to buy the rate down. If you can't use it for something else. But if you can get a seller to give the concessions, the 2-1 buy down far, far exceeds the permanent rate buy down. The only way the permanent rate down makes sense is if you're one of the people that thinks that we're going to have very, very high rates for over 3 years. And there's some people out there that think that, but I mean, listen to the experts. I mean, Barry could be wrong. You know, some of the other guys hammering, some of them guys could be wrong, but I don't think they're wrong. I mean, everything points. If you look at the 27 years I've been in this business, rates have never stayed high for more than 18 months. Most of the time, rates spike up and come back down within 8 months. I mean, I went back and looked at my whole career and looked at rate patterns, and rates have never went up and stayed up for very long. I mean, I think the longest ever I saw in my 27 years was, I think it was 17 months or something like that. I mean, they don't go up and stay up. We run on these rate cycles, you know. Are they going to get back down to the twos? No. If you think they're ever going to get back into twos again, you're probably dreaming. Doesn't mean we won't get into fours next year or the year after. It doesn't mean we won't maybe see a 3 handle at some point, maybe a 3.5 or 3.75. You know, I don't think we'll ever see the twos again, and we probably don't want to see the twos again, because to see the twos again, we need some catastrophic thing to happen that would not be good for people in general, you know. But yeah, that's the difference. If you just take the number of payments they made and it comes out of the pool of money, and anything left over goes back to them as far as a payoff. It's a no-lose situation for the buyer. No lose at all. It's a no-lose situation for the realtor. You know, I show my realtors, I say, hey, instead of lowering the price of the house, you know, build that in. Guess what? You're getting 2 or 3% commission on an extra 10 or 15 or $20,000 of buy down. You know, show it to the realtors how they're financially benefiting from it. So you get the seller to give the concessions. The buyer has a no-lose situation. The realtor has a no-lose situation. The listing agent has a no-lose situation, because now their commissions are also higher. The seller, yeah, they're paying a few $100s more in real estate commissions, but now they have an excited buyer that's ready to close on their house, where maybe the house was set for another 2 or 3 weeks, maybe longer. I mean, in Arizona, it's still a good market, but we're not seeing lines of people with cops directing traffic for open houses anymore like we were last year. I mean, last year we were seeing 40, 50 offers on the first day the house would go live. Now it's taking 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks for a selling house. Some of these houses have been sitting for a couple months. The sellers in my market are like, hell yeah, let's find a way to put this together, you know. So we have not had much pushback at all from sellers. A few, but very few. But again, every market's different, so you got to talk to your realtors and figure out if it works for your market, because I don't want to tell you it's going to work in every single market, because Jackson, Mississippi is a great example. Michelle is a very good loan officer. She's got great relationship with realtors, and she's like, Todd, I've tried. It's not here yet, but it will be.
So Todd, we're going to get into some questions. I'm going to run through the questions down in the comments, and then everybody, we can start. If you want to raise your hand and ask questions, we can get into that. But we'll start with David Cook. Do you think the 2-1 buy down is here to stay, or will it eventually be retired again?
I think it'll eventually be probably retired. Maybe it won't be retired, but none of us will look at it again for a while. I think it's a tool for the market we're in. It just wouldn't have worked, you know, last year. First of all, you can't have a negative rate on a loan. But if let's say we get to 4.5, and let's say 4.5 becomes a new normal. And don't freak out by me saying that 4.5 is a new normal if you've only been in business for 3 years, okay? Because it's still a damn good rate. You know, but if 4.5 is a new normal, I mean, do we need it to be at 2.5, 3.5, and 4.5? I mean, I think the lenders, I don't think the lenders will take it away. I just don't think that when we get into a more normalized market, that we're going to get to where sellers are just willing to cough up 2.5% seller concessions. I mean, they're doing it now in a lot of markets because the market is slowed, and they're scared to death that they're going to sit on the house much longer, and they really want to sell their house. So yeah, I don't know they'll permanently go away. I just think the appetite for it will probably go way, way down.
Okay. So so Breon, he's on, and he asked a question like, what is the reason it has to be paid by the seller and no other party?
I mean, I've been told, I mean, that's a question probably for somebody at UWM or another lender, but I've been told it's got something to do with compliance issues. You know, it's money that is set aside into an account, and basically it's a little tricky from what I understand from a compliance issue, because basically the seller is making a partial house payment for the buyer for the next 2 years. And you get into real estate agents doing that with their commissions possibly. I think there's some compliance issues there, but again, I can't legally answer that question properly. I think that's a great question that maybe Anthony can get from Matt or Alan or somebody at UWM.
Okay. So this is from Nate Joma. Have you had any realtors who have tried to relate it to subprime smoke and mirror type of program? I understand the program well, and it's not, but what is your advice to soften the realtor to hear you out?
So I had two, of all the realtors I sent to, and I talked to probably, not all of them responded, but I've talked about the 2-1 buy down in length to probably about 20 realtors at this point. And I had two that I can remember that were very skeptical. I'll mean, like I said, I was very skeptical. The first month or so it was out, I kind of ignored it because I was skeptical of it until I really learned it. It just took educating them on it. They thought that the money would be lost. Once I showed them how the money was not lost, it really took away their anxieties of having a buyer pay higher for a house than what they could get it discounted for. That was really the main concern. After I got past the fact that the money wasn't lost, the realtors in both cases, the objections were gone. I mean, there was no more, nothing. I mean, they were fine. I think that's the biggest thing to educate them on. That, and educating them on the fact that they have to talk to you before they make the offer, because you got to make sure there's enough money being pulled aside and a little bit of a cushion. You can't never ever tell the realtor to the penny how much you need. Always lie to them and pad it by $200 or something. They're not going to be mad if at closing they see that $200 of it went towards the title company fees or something. They're not. But give yourself a cushion, because you never want to be right on the money.
100%. So Carrie Ann has, what would happen to the escrowed interest payment if the buyer refinances prior to 2 years? Not sure if I missed that. So Carrie Ann, that's basically what Todd was just hitting on, is like any of the money that's escrowed, if the loan's prepaid, comes back as was it a principal reduction on the payoff? Todd?
Yeah, was something about, did I hear something about biweekly payments or no?
No, basically it was like, what happens to the money that's in the escrow account? So if the person refinances out of their 2-year,
yeah, exactly what I was saying. Any unused funds go back to the buyer in a form of a principal reduction or a payoff credit. So yeah, so if they refinance, 5, 6, 8 months in, and there's still $7,000 or $8,000 that's not been used, it does not go away. It goes towards the payoff of the property. So it's a credit right back to the buyer. They don't lose it.
So Kristen in Richmond, Virginia says, we are still seeing very little concessions on the initial contract right now, but are finally seeing pretty substantial credits after the inspection period. I can ask my EE, but do you happen to know if you can do a COC and switch to a 2-1 buy down after the loan is disclosed and submitted, or would I need a new loan number and be subject to the worst case pricing? I think it would be good for you Todd, to walk through like how this needs to be structured within the contract specifically.
Yeah, you can absolutely switch it to a 2-1 buy down. So you just have to redisclose, but you will not lose your lock. You will not lose your loan number. When you go into UW, and again, I don't know exactly how your guys' system works because I'm on Calyx. So I import a loan, and I know it's a dinosaur program. I upload a file in UWM, and then I'm in UWM system itself to lock the rate. I don't know. Does Arrive, is that how, do you guys do the same thing? I don't want to get into how you do it.
Yeah, it's pretty much the same workflow, but yeah. So if you were to walk through like as if we're in UWM system.
Yeah. So when you're in there and you're locking your rate, it'll ask you, you have the small little section that has the basics, like 30-year fixed, and then you expand it down to where you can see like your LTV and all that in the rate lock screen, and there'll be a section where it says a drop down box where it says buy down. You can hit none, 1-1, 2-1, because there is a 1-1 buy down, by the way, if you don't have enough credits. You can do a simple 1-1 buy down, which is simply if your rate starts at 7, the first year it's at 6, and then year 2 it goes to 7. It's the same exact product. It just requires less seller concessions, and you don't get this big a benefit. But as the question was asked, if I have, they go through inspection and now there's $8,000 in seller credits, Sure, you can switch it to a 2-1, or if there's not enough to switch it to a 2-1, switch it to a 1-1. But you can use those seller credits towards and switch it halfway midstream. It's just a simple COC. They honor your pricing and everything else. Very simple.
Got it. So, I guess on the sales side of things, like this is like the bigger part to me than just the structuring is how are you, kind of, going out to the real estate agent and talking about this. Obviously people post on social media, but similar to, when we see lenders promote it, if you're not really like actually want to pay attention, it's just kind of white noise. So, when you're talking to an agent that is unfamiliar with it, like, how are you, kind of starting that conversation? Is it more about getting the people that are on the fence off the fence, or giving them a new tool to sell?
Yeah, so I'm just going into it like I call my agent and say, hey, the first thing I do is I say, you know what, we've got so many buyers right now, and I'll look through and say, hey, I'll say Kelly. I'll use Kelly at Red for an example. She's one of my best agents. I'll call Kelly and say, hey, you know what? I just looked. We've got 12 pre-quals that are active, but I haven't, these people are saying that they're not doing anything. Because I follow up on my pre-quals every couple of weeks, say, hey, how are you doing? And I'll say, I got these 12. I'm sure you're following up on too, but they're just sitting, waiting. They think the prices are going to drop. They think this is going to happen. I say, I think this product is going to help us get these people moving. That's the first thing I say is, let's look at all the people that you got that are sitting, that you've talked to, because they were interested at one time, but when rates went way up this year, they decided to hold off. And it gives the agent, and I tell them, it gives you a great opportunity to call these old customers back with something besides the typical, hey, I'm checking in. Are you sure there's nothing you like? You want me to set you up a new MLS search? It's the same boring thing that these agents are doing just to stay in front of their clients, which you got to stay in front of your clients. But now I'm giving you something that you can call them and say, hey, I have something that's going to save you a lot of money and might be worthwhile. Let's look at getting you back into the market. It gives them something new to say when they're getting in front of their clients, because let's face it, that same old routine of calling and just staying in front of your clients, it's boring. And if the client's truly worried about house payments, they're like, well, I know rates are still high, so no, I'm good for now. I'll wait till rates drop. It's just a tool. It gives me something to sound excited to the agents about, and in return, it gives the agent something to sound excited to the consumer about. And then after they've talked to the consumer, I tell them, let me know so I can go behind you and talk to the consumer. And we're kind of tag teaming the consumer with all this great savings that you're going to do if we do it now, before housing prices go up maybe more, before, and I've told a number of customers, I said, look, because I had a few customers, one in particular that closed on this already, that had started looking back in 2021, got extremely frustrated because every offer he would make would be beaten out by 20 others. 2022 comes along, and the first number of months was still like that. He kept waiting. He kept saying, well, when these sellers get reasonable again and I don't have to pay 25, 30, 40 grand over list price, I'm going to look. By the time it got to that, rates were back up into the sixes. And now he's upset because, the house price is going to be, the housing payment is going to be too high. So that guy right there, and he literally closed 10 days or so ago. It was about 2 weeks ago. It brought him back into the market, because now he's not competing with 25 or 30 other offers. He's actually getting a house. And what he did was he went in at full list price, but got 3% concessions, and the seller took it. And he used the buy down, and the rest of the money paid most of his closing costs. Arizona's a low closing cost state, by the way, guys. So 3/4 of a point to 1 point covers all settlement charges, including prepays. I know in Pennsylvania, you guys have extremely high closing costs. So
everything's more expensive here.
So this guy was able to get almost all his closing costs and everything paid with 3% concessions plus a 2-1 buy down. It got him off the fence. That realtor made her $12,000 or $13,000 commission or whatever it was. I made mine. He's in a house, win-win all the way around. And that realtor now is selling the shit out of that 2-1 buy down. I mean,
awesome.
It paid per day.
So we got a fellow Arizonian here, Brian Cardenas. You're up.
Hey, Todd, thanks for doing this for us.
Yeah.
So with the contract addendum that we need to specify what the seller's concessions are going to, is the language different for each investor, or is there one standard language that we can use regardless of which investor we're sending it to?
That's a good question because I'm trying to figure that out right now myself. I've done some of these where it just had seller concessions and we were fine. Recently, I've had 2 deals with UWM where the underwriter conditioned me for, and they wanted the realtors to do an addendum stating that the seller concessions were allowed to go toward, that the seller was aware the concessions were going towards a 2-1 buy down. I've not been able to get a clear answer on that from UWM right now, so I'm telling my agents right now just to put a simple blurb in there. This is Arizona talk now for him. You know, I think it's page 3 or something. The page of the contract that has the title company's information right above that, there's a place where they write in concessions, right? But then there's a section 8 where they can just write in comments. You know, sometimes they write stupid comments in there, by the way.
Or they turn into attorneys.
Yeah. But I've been telling my agents under section 8 of the Arizona contract just to put in there, you know, sellers aware that any concessions may be used towards 2-1 buy down, rate buy downs. And the sellers don't care. What's it matter to them anyway, you know? But honestly, right now, I don't know what's the right answer to that because some of the underwriters UWM are letting it slide. Some of them are wanting it spelled out on an addendum. So I would just say up front, have it listed somewhere on the contract that seller concessions are, the seller's aware concessions may be used for a 2-1 buy down. Sellers don't care, realtors don't care. Just get it up front and you don't have any problems.
And we'll take that as a takeaway to get a firm answer for everybody by early this week. Nate Joma, you are up next.
Yeah, I think I already know the answer, but I just want to make sure I'm not totally off base. So the funds that are used, whatever that percentage is for the 2-1 buy down, has to fit within the guideline for the interested party contributions, right?
Correct. So, you know, if you're a 5% down loan, 3% is the max you can use. This cannot be used on investment properties, by the way. It's primary and secondary homes only. No investment properties for 2-1 buy downs, no jumbos. But yeah, so you have to watch that because I recently had one where the seller, it was written into the contract, the seller was given 3%, but then the inspection came back and they didn't want to do repairs. And it was like $2,500 more credits. So we had to lower the sale price of the house by $2,500 instead of adding to concessions because, you know, you're maxed. So yeah, the 2-1 buy down comes out of that.
So, Nate Fain, you're up next.
Hey Todd, thanks for doing this for us. I'm in a market pretty similar to Michelle, and I think I'm probably a little bit ahead of her. But one thing I've got, are you reaching out to like the listing agents, or listening out to buyers agents, or just like reaching out to your database of agents?
So I talk to every listing agent when an offer's made. So, you know, I do have a couple agents that are primary listing agents. Of course, they're not referring me. Every now and then I get a referral from them because I'll have a guy that their lender's a jackass and they'll be like fed up and they'll say, hey, you've got to talk to my guy. But for the most part, let's face it, I don't get very many referrals from the listing side. But every single one of my buyers, just agents in general, when they make an offer for a buyer, they CC me on that email and they put in that email, they'll do their normal language, you know, hey, Mr. and Mrs. Smith's making an offer on blah, 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 blah. And then there'll be a small little blurb in there that says, I have taken the liberty to CC my lender, Todd Bitter at JKS Mortgage. I've worked with Todd for many, many years. He's a great loan officer. He's available for any questions you might have. So we've been doing that for years and years and years. And if you don't have your agent CCing you on these offers so you can then immediately call the listing agent, your agents and you aren't doing it right. Always forget the buy down, always be tagged in those offers, because I usually, once I see that offer comes in, I immediately shoot an email out. I reply all and say, hey, I've done all my, I just say something about the customer, say, Mr. Listing Agent, I can assure you I've got a complete package on this borrower. We've done all of our due diligence on it. There are solid people. This loan will close without any hiccups at all. I send that out immediately, hopefully within 5 minutes of seeing that email. I then usually wait about an hour because they're not doing anything right away with that offer. You know, sometimes they haven't even looked at the email an hour later, but I usually want to at least give it a little bit of time so the listing agents open the email, and then I call them. Sometimes they call me before I even get to them, because sometimes the listing agent gets that offer, especially now, and they'll read what I wrote, and then next thing I know, they're calling me saying, hey, great information email. Let me ask you a few more questions. But whether they're calling me or I'm calling them like an hour later, I call them to go over the strength of the file. And if it's got the 2-1 buy down written into it, I go into it and say, hey, I just want to see if you understand what we're talking about here. A lot of them do, because the Cromford report has been pushing that 2-1 buy down, but a lot of them don't. And I just go into explain it to them and say, you know, it's a great thing. It strengthens, you know, this seller or this buyer is excited to get this. It's just doesn't cost your seller anything more than if we were using it for closing costs. I've had a lot of good questions about it. In fact, I think I might be picking up an agent from the listing side because of this. We've been lightly talking, you know, nothing yet, but yeah, if you're not reaching out to the listing agent before rates went up, you should definitely be doing it now. And then it just gives you an opportunity to explain it to them without them calling you.
One of the things, and I've only started having success this week doing this, but I've been reaching out to the listing agents in some of the zip codes that I'm targeting, but I'm waiting until the house has been on the market for about 30 days, because that seems to be when the price reductions start. So I'm trying to catch it before the price reduction, but I'm also saying, okay, let's say $500,000 house, you're going to do a 5% reduction. That's $25,000. If you only need 2.5% for the buy down, why don't you just do a $5,000 price reduction, put in the listing description about the buy down, that puts it back on the realtor's hot sheet, and then they're going to read the description again, and they're like eating that up like hotcakes.
No, you're right. And you know what, you're actually ahead of me on this. So it's something I've told Adam, who works for me. I've told him he should start reaching out to listing agents. And you're right. If you can see, if you're not working with an agent, but you look through and you look through listings and you can see there's houses that are getting aged, I think it would be fantastic to reach out to them. Unbelievably great. It gives you something to talk to an agent about, instead of saying, hey, let's go to coffee. You've got something exciting to offer, and say, hey, I noticed your house on 123 Main. I noticed that it's been on the market for 45 days now, and still active. Can I tell you about the 2-1 buy down? It might be something you guys can put in your listing. It might drive a lot of traffic. I think that's great. I haven't done it yet. Now, the only reason I haven't done it yet, it's on my sheet to start working on. I've been telling Adam to do it. I've just been so busy the last 5 or 6 weeks with stuff not related to my originating, but like speaking engagement. I'm in Irvine, California next week for another speaking engagement. I was just in Philadelphia. I was at one last week. I just haven't had time, but Adam's doing it right now. I don't know. I need to ask him how much success he's had, but he's working it from that angle. So I think that's fantastic.
Awesome. Kristen Morgan, you're up next.
Yeah, the only other thing too is I'm still seeing like some of my clients that have like contingency to sell their home to buy another. And I'm talking to the same kind of thing. Like, Nate, that was a great point, waiting like the 30 days. But like, even when I have a client that has a house that's contingent upon selling to buy another home, I'm talking to them and their agent about factoring that in to like their overall like thing, because I feel like that is so important, especially in this market. But I just wanted to tell people like, hey, that's a really great approach for your contingent buyers.
Yeah. No, I think that's unbelievable. A great approach. Absolutely. Might speed things up.
All right. So we're going to wrap up things here in a couple of minutes. If you have any questions, please raise your hand. Just two things I wanted to hit you with, Todd, just as a kind of, if you've dealt with this yet, as far as major objections that you've seen come up when it comes to either the listing agent, to the buyer's agent, the buyer's agents that you're presenting this to, or consumers to their buyer's agent when they're presenting it to them. Any common objections that you're seeing or that you've had to consistently overcome?
Again, I think the biggest objection I was hearing at first is that, you know, they thought that the money was lost. You know, that was the biggest thing I got up front from the buyer side. The listing side, the only objections I've had is, and it hasn't really been a big deal, because basically we're staying at list price and just getting concessions now. We did have one recently where we had to, the list price I think was 405 and we had to go to 408 and some change. I'd have to look it up. I'm not gonna look it up, but we went a little over list price because it was already a pretty good priced home that they were trying to sell quickly. And the list agent just simply, their concern was, what happens if the house doesn't appraise? What are we going to do? And I said, well, the customer still qualifies, because you were qualifying them off the full rate. And I just said, so look, the customer still qualifies. It just means that maybe we don't do a 2-1 buy down. Maybe we do a 1-1 buy down if it comes a little short. If it comes in way short, maybe we do no buy down. I'm telling the listing agent that, and they do qualify. Doesn't mean that when the appraisal comes in light that the buyer might just up and cancel because they want the 2-1 buy down. But that's how I've kind of calmed the nerves of the listing agents. And I've only had that asked the one time when we went over list price to get it, and the appraisal did come in okay. Luckily in Arizona, I'm guessing Brian's seen this, is appraisals are pretty good right now. The market slowdown hasn't filtered into the appraised values yet. I'm not going to sugarcoat this and say that the 2-1 buy down is not without pitfalls here and there. At some point, if housing prices do come down more and appraisals do catch up, it could get into a situation where you have to switch them to a 1-1 buy down, because the seller may be like, look, it came in $4,000 low, but that's your problem because you've got all this concessions built in. So, I'll lower the price, but I'm also lowering the concessions, So when you get in that, just be ready to sell the buyer, hey, we can't do a 2-1 buy down, but we can do a 1-1. Hey, it still saves you a lot of money. You're still going to be able to most likely refinance before you get to that second year in that case, based on all the things we hear from like the Barry Habibs of the world. So yeah, I would just, that's probably the biggest objection you're going to hear from a listing agent. What if the appraisal comes in low? And then from buyer's agents, it's the only objection has been, what if they refinance or sell the house? And that's easy to overcome because it's true, they get the money back.
Yeah, and I would say the value part of it, like we saw this in past markets, like it's inevitable that it always trails what's actually happening by 12 months or 9 months, but it's going to happen. And at the end of the day, when it first happens, like Jason True just commented, like it feels painful, but like it's just the market, coming back to where it's going to be. So we are going to wrap up here, guys. Just a huge thank you to Todd Bitter for taking the time to do this. We will get that email out to everybody that Todd shared with Redfin on, how he basically was able to come over the barrier to entry and start getting the conversation going. So we'll get that out to everybody to share. I'm going to work with our team on creating some resources based upon this training for us to disseminate as well. So big thank you, Todd. You were the man. We appreciate your time. Anything you want to say before we wrap up?
Let me say one thing about that email Anthony's going to share with you. It's not a slick, fancy email. Okay. I never, ever send these slick, fancy emails to realtors, because when I get the slick, fancy emails from like, I don't care who it is, UWM, Home Point, whoever, I kind of gloss over them because they just look like marketing materials.
Yep.
So when you see this email, it's just me. It's me just talking to realtors in email format. And when you see it, it doesn't look, I mean, it's professional, but it's not slick. There might even be a typo in there too. I don't know, but it doesn't matter because it looks like real talk. And that is what, so I don't want you to look at it and go, this looks like he just threw something. I did throw something together because that's what realtors respond to, is what I've found over the years. They respond to real talk. So when you see it, it's also dated. It's from like a month or so ago. So the examples are a little dated on rates, but it's the same story.
Completely. Well, thank you, Todd. Thank you guys for taking the time. If anybody has any questions, feel free to share them in Workplace, and I'll circle back with Todd to get them answered.